Hey all you Trekkies out there! Continuing the best and worst of each series, today we're talking Voyager on this edition of...
Yeah, it's the best five, worst five, no one has seen. Yeah, it's the best five, worst five Trek's ever seen.
Across its 7 seasons, Voyager is one of the most mediocre series in the Star Trek franchise. There's not a ton at the top or bottom, and many find themselves in the middle of the pack. Even many of the worst we'll talk about here are still watchable. As usual, starting with the 5th worst, Tattoo. Star Trek has a history of flat-out getting Native American themes wrong. While this isn't even the worst example of that, it's just a bunch of cobbled-together generic Native ideas with a Star Trek twist. Many of the problems can be attributed to the fake Native American script consultant Jameik Highwater, who lied about his heritage for 30 years to get work in Hollywood. Apparently, aliens from 70,000 light-years away came to Earth centuries ago and gave some early Native people a genetic memory or whatever, because they were the most understanding and in touch with their surroundings of any sentient life these people had ever discovered. Aside from Chakotay getting naked at one point, the episode is slow-paced, dull, and starts the trend of completely uninteresting episodes starring Voyager's first officer. Number 4. Favorite Son. This was already pinned in our previous video about Harry Kim as one of the worst episodes surrounding that character, but is also just plain one of Voyager's worst overall. Much like the episode before this, it's very unbelievable that so many races from the Delta Quadrant would make it to Earth over the eons. In this case, though, it's just a lie to make Harry believe he's really an alien from this world of all women, so they can use men to become pregnant and then dispose of them for good. The fight scenes are really over the top, and this plot probably would have played better in TOS than Voyager. At the very least, I think Gene Roddenberry would approve of this sexually charged script. Number 3. Threshold. This is usually said by many to be Voyager's worst episode. Personally, I think at least the first half is actually pretty cool. In the Star Trek Encyclopedia, the warp scale had the idea of warp 10 being infinite velocity listed, and finally having an episode that explains and achieves it was actually pretty cool. I just wish they had done some cool effects to illustrate occupying all points of the universe simultaneously, with the only fault I see being the sheer luck that a shuttle that's everything everywhere all at once comes out of this form of warp near Voyager, and not like 3 galaxies away. Now the second half of the episode is another animal entirely. Quite literally even, as Tom and later Janeway rapidly evolve into humanity's final form as some kind of manatee-like creature. Tom screams about pepperoni pizza, kidnaps Kathy, and takes her on a romantic getaway that again ends just a few light years from Voyager, despite being in a Warp 10 shuttle. Chakotay makes the questionable decision to leave their CGI offspring on the planet that I'm sure will in no way contaminate the biosphere, and despite the Doctor being able to easily reverse the process, Warp 10 is deemed too difficult to use to get off Gilligan's Island so early in the show's run. Such a great premise that quickly went off the rails. Number 2. Fury. Hey, isn't it nice to bring back a main character a few seasons after being written off? I mean, it could have been if it didn't fly in the face of pretty much everything we knew about Kes beforehand. Considering the last time we saw her, she was so grateful for the Voyager crew making her part of their family, she helped them get 10 years closer to home and out of Borg space. Her fiery return of vengeance, though, just doesn't make any sense. She somehow uses Voyager's warp core to go back in time and tries to take her younger self back to Ocampa, only to be thwarted by herself in the form of a hologram she recorded earlier to stop herself from doing what she's doing. Neither the time shenanigans that stop this, nor her motivations for doing what she's doing make any sense. And this is the biggest waste of a returning character across the franchise. And the worst episode of Voyager at number 1? The Fight. Like Threshold, this episode premise has a bit of potential. It's always nice to see Boothby, this time as Chakotay's boxing coach. The idea of chaotic space, which basically just randomizes your controls so you can't tell which way is up or out, is a pretty cool concept. Unfortunately, the presentation of it through a boxing match in Chakotay's mind is the biggest mess in all of Voyager's writing. It's all told through weird innuendo and quick cuts that feels like the episode lacks any real cohesive element. This would unfortunately be Ray Walston's final appearance as Boothby in the franchise, and it's too bad it's attached to such a poorly constructed episode. As we angle the nacelles to warp over to Voyager's best episodes, if you're enjoying the content, please consider a like and subscribe. At 5th best, Death Wish. This is absolutely one of Voyager and Star Trek as a whole's most poignant episodes, by dealing with end-of-life decisions in the most dramatic way possible. I mean, this takes one of Trek's best storytelling elements, the courtroom episode, and as usual, does it well. On top of all of the real-world allegories, the episode gives us a cameo by Jonathan Frakes, and shows us a version of the Q continuum for the first time. Other than Q's multiple misogynistic jabs at Janeway, it's a nearly perfect episode that in classic Star Trek tradition explores the human condition through an alien culture's norms being different than our own. Number 4, Blink of an Eye. One of Star Trek's more unique sci-fi plots, in an episode that could have been in any Trek series, and for once has nothing to do with being exclusive to the Delta Q. A society where centuries go by for every hour that most of the rest of the galaxy experiences, and they have a killer evolving matte painting to highlight their achievements. In fact, this is the final use of the ubiquitous matte paintings in the franchise, and to me, it's the best of the bunch. For a race that went from worshipping Voyager as a god to almost destroying them, and then developed the technology to finally break them out of orbit, is one of the most classically Star Trek messages about cooperation and empathy for people that you don't know or understand. Number 3, Dark Frontier. Once you look past the Janeway decided to go on the offense against the Borg, and for the sake of stealing tech from them, there's actually some great story. We get to see what caused Seven to become one of the first human Borg assimilated as a child, and how her parents were kind of bad at being guardians of a young kid. We also get to see how far Janeway is willing to go to protect members of her crew in an effort to get Seven back. We also find out that the collective is slightly more nuanced than previously thought, as the Queen entices Seven to be both part of the collective while maintaining individuality. It's just generally a satisfying episode that fills every second of its runtime with salient points, which many two-part and feature-length episodes don't fully take advantage of. Still have to wonder if Janeway's actions are considered piracy under Federation law, though. Number 2, Living Witness. This is the closest Voyager ever came to exploring the mirror universe. Honestly, though, this episode is probably more interesting and nuanced than the usually laughable juxtapositions of the Mirror U. Set about the same time in the future as Discovery's later seasons are set in, a version of the Doctor has to get the record straight about how his ship influenced this planet with 2 races on it. We see the ultimate look at the old saying, "Those who are victorious write the history." Though, the Doctor's very presence brings up some uncomfortable truths in this racially charged society. It ends up bringing forth meaningful change for this society that we see again hundreds of more years after that. It really makes you wonder that even in our modern age, where everything is cataloged, what those in a few hundred years will actually believe life was like for us in the early 21st century. Before I reveal the top episode of Voyager, I just wanted to give an honorable mention to both Year of Hell and Scorpion. They are great two-parters that were barely edged out of this list because I feel like the others here fill their entire runtime a little better. But they are also great top episodes. And with that said, number 1, Endgame. Yes, I know Voyager's final episode is a controversial one, so hear me out. Even though I've heard some say that this is one of Trek's worst episodes ever, I can understand not being a big fan of complicated time shenanigans where C ends up preceding A in a cause and effect cycle. However, there's so much that this episode gets right that I can easily look past this. I not only think this is Voyager's best episode, but also the best series finale Trek's ever had. While All Good Things and What We Leave Behind were absolutely amazing episodes that closed out their respective series well, they both focused primarily on the captains of those series without providing a ton of meaningful screen time for the other characters on the show. Though this episode even doubles down on the amount of Janeway, it also focuses well on the birth of Tom and B'Elanna's daughter. Though a little late in the game, it brings Seven's previously seen infatuation with Chakotay in the real world. While present prime timeline Harry Kim doesn't do much, we find that he has long-term potential to be a captain himself. Janeway dealing a crippling blow to the Borg is also one of the best things to ever happen for the sake of the entire galaxy. So eat your heart out, Michael Burnham. The first time I saw this episode, I was disappointed with the very ending. Despite finally getting back to Earth, it felt like we needed a few more minutes of post-drama closure. In more recent years, though, I realized that we kind of got that post-closure at the beginning of the episode, with the fireworks and reception that involves the entire crew. I was also more recently reminded by the finale of Discovery that artificially extending an episode is actually worse, because at least with Voyager, I'm left wanting more. And with Discovery, I just wanted to turn it off after the wedding scene. Yes, this is the longest entry in a Best 5, Worst 5 video I've ever done, because I so thoroughly believe in this episode, and I've condensed this significantly, not touching on a few other bits of this amazing episode. What's your favorite episode of Voyager?